You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to welcome our good friend of the show, James Robbins. Let me rephrase that. James Robbins. We call him Jim because we love him and because we've been friends for a long time. Jim, again, is the deputy editor for Rare.us, which, of course, you could find at www.rare.us. Jim, welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday.
Hey, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was just sort of bemoaning how it's so odd that you can have such a great day, and every time you have a great day, you need to do nothing more than turn on the news to see that our fellow Americans, somebody's always hurting.
Well, I mean, that's the case. And when you think about what happened in Oklahoma, it's really saddening and terrifying. I don't know, John, if you've ever been in or around tornadoes, but I can tell you from personal experience, growing up in Ohio, where we had some really bad ones, particularly in the 70s, that hit our town and other towns like Xenia, for example, which was devastated. It's scary. And for the people who were directly injured or who were killed by this, obviously that's the worst part of the tragedy. Other people, it's like surviving just a terrible shock, PTSD symptoms and things. It's just going through something like that is absolutely terrifying. So really my heart goes out to those people.
It really does. I actually have, Jim, there were two specific occasions. I've seen funnel clouds before, but I had three actually. I had one little one where we were kids in middle school, and we had this really interesting character who was half deaf, so the kids always played with his talk quietly to get him to turn up his earphones, but his hearing aids. But that aside, he was such an interesting guy. He was a lot of fun, and you could always tell when something wasn't quite right. And he came, had a panic in his voice, and ran us all from the buses into the building, and we actually saw this funnel cloud. But this was New Jersey, where if a storm brews, it comes and goes in a moment's notice, and it literally, the only damage it did was it removed the steeple off a small local church. Now, I'm sure that was really sad and frustrating for the church, but there was splinters of wood on the ground. And God remained intact, and all the people remained intact, and it was just wood, and so that was a little scare. But I had two instances. One of which was my wife, I should say, probably comes from watching the Wizard of Oz. My wife is afraid of tornadoes, and so here we are one day about a dozen years ago at a friend's house, and all of a sudden we're in the kitchen, and we hear that freight train noise you so often hear people speak of. And then we look at each other, and a split second later, all these Tupperware, we were doing dishes, and all these Tupperware lids from the sink jumped up and stuck to the window. And we looked at each other. We had that expletive expression, and then woof, into the bathroom. So it turned out it was quick and hopped around, and we didn't see anything. But there was one time I was on a camping trip up in the Appalachian Trail in the mountains of New Jersey. And we actually had a tornado come through and killed people around the camping ground. And what really struck me, Jim, is the area in the camping ground it hit was exactly where I would have been sleeping, or at least tent bound, had it not been the fact that I woke up at 1 a.m, drove up there, and got to the campground hours before it opened to get a spot, and a car pulled in literally seconds behind me to do the same thing. And that was, and I got the last spot that wasn't near the area hit by the tornado. So it just shows you, had I stopped for one extra gas fill, that could have been me taking a giant oak. It's just, life is like that.
There you go. It's completely random. Back when I was 6 years old, we lived in one house, and then we had another house a little bigger that being built down the road that we were going to move into, and a tornado came right down the street. It skipped in front of the house we were living in, and it took out the other house. So, go figure.
Well, these things may be random, but there's always politics, chaos, and the undesired world order that we have to deal with here on what we do for a living. So Jim, what's on your mind? Tell us what are of all the many great things that Rare's been covering today. What are one or two of the things that you're really feeling passionate about today?
Well, today's big thing is that Rare has an exclusive commentary by Rand Paul, Senator from Kentucky. I'm sure your listeners know who he is, and talking about the hearings that were held regarding Apple Corp and its tax situation, because the Senate undertook a study, an investigation of corporate taxes, and found out that Apple is not paying billions in taxes that some liberal senators say that they should be paying. But in fact, Apple is doing everything according to the law, and even the Senate investigation turned up that Apple is doing nothing illegal, that these are completely legal tax avoidance strategies, which, I don't know about you, John, but I personally avoid paying taxes if I can. I mean, you don't want to engage in illegal evasion of taxes, but if you can avoid a tax through, taking a home loan deduction or, child support deduction or what have you, whatever it happens to be, people do that. Well, Apple Corp does that. They use the law that exists to avoid paying billions in taxes. And Senator Paul writes very persuasively that the liberals on the Senate and the Senate committee were just grandstanding, hauling the CEO of Apple up there to berate him for doing what is in his shareholders' best interest, for what's in their customers' best interest, and what is completely legal. And if these senators have a problem with what Apple's doing, they should stop making speeches and start writing good laws. Make the tax code comprehensible. If they think that Apple is unfairly exploiting loopholes, well, then close them. Don't just jawbone about it. You people are United States senators. Try doing your job. So we're really happy that Senator Paul gave us that exclusive, and it's up there at rare.us if anyone wants to read it.
I'll tell you what, I think this is an important story for a couple of reasons. It touches so many notes. First off, we think of Apple as a great American story. We think of Apple as a great survival story, a great story about jobs and innovation. But we also think of the dark sides of Apple, right? Apple was the underdog when it was fighting Microsoft for dominance, and now of course Apple's become an enormously dominant company. It could be it's bigger than
it's
some
kind
countries.
of a country too. It's a cult of it.
Yeah, it could be. But then we also see the dark side, right? The tax side, and again, avoidance is legal, but it's due to the complexity of the tax code. The production of Apple products. Apple has high margin products made from very, very low cost labor in China, and a lot of jobs being offshored. And in fact, Apple's contracts almost single-handedly help to produce and make one of the world's largest behemoths, Foxconn, who is a manufacturer of a great many of those products in China, much to the demise of manufacturing in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world. And so you could easily take somebody like Apple and you could put them up on a pillar and offer up some praise. You can also put them up on a pillar and cut the legs out from under their stool. It's what you call. But in this particular case, I blame the government because, as you point out, Jim, the tax code is too complex, it's incomprehensible, and it's not particularly fair. And if the tax code was simple, then they wouldn't have all these avoidance games. They would simply go about their business, they would do their business, they would have some money to spend at the end, and instead of paying some kind of tax on profits, they would simply be paying some reasonable, predictable tax on the goods and services that they buy, or they would be paid at the end point of production, as is often the case.
Oh, sure. And, it's easy. I think part of the reason why they used Apple as an example is that it has these other problems that you identify with, shipping jobs overseas and having problems with its plants in China or wherever. And since Steve Jobs died, it's kind of lost some of its halo. Steve Jobs, not one of the great humanitarians in human history, I might point out. It was ironic that the Occupy Wall Street crowd took a moment of silence and lit candles and were singing and stuff, singing dirges when he passed away, like he was one of them. This is one of the richest guys in the world who never gave much to charity and really didn't have any use for people like that. So it was ironic, to say the least. So yeah, easy for the Senate to haul Apple up there and to pound the drum a little bit. But at the end of the day, you're talking about the very people who write the laws. That's why it makes it so ironic. If these were just protesters in the streets or commentators like me just mouthing off, that's one thing. But these are senators. Can't senators write good laws? Isn't that their job? It strikes me that when you have Carl Levin of Michigan up there, denouncing Apple. Well, dude, it's your job to write a good law. So why don't you spend your time doing that instead of just making a speech and badgering a CEO of a company that provides 600,000 jobs globally?
Yeah, it's really like I said, it's a complex story, but at the end of the day, to me, it's all about the rules of business should be simple when it comes to anything pertaining to interaction with the government. Minimum regulations, the kind that absolutely protect us. I don't know if you saw this, Jim. I didn't actually see this on Rare, although not too much passes through your filters. But apparently there was some health studies. The UN's? I'm trying to remember who. Oh, I'm sorry. It was the World Cancer Research Fund. Had taken a compilation of 7,000 different studies that they did, and they found a very, very tight correlation across the board of links to cancer with heavily processed meat. And they weren't saying meat in general. They weren't saying don't have a hamburger, don't have a hot dog. I'm sorry, don't have a burger or don't have a steak. What they were saying is beef jerky and bacon bits and hot dogs and these sandwich meats and all these things, all these nitrites have a huge, huge cancer correlation. And to me, it's so ironic that so many of the things that we eat or that maybe should have more regulation or should have more scrutiny seem to get a complete pass because the lobbyists are paying to make sure that it gets a complete pass. But then other things that they shouldn't have any business being involved in, Jim, we can't. They're inextractable, right? They're like an abscess on a tooth. It's not going to go away on its own unless we're determined, to seek an alternative means to destroy it.
That's true. And then the question becomes, how do you do that? Is it through education? Is it through government regulation? Should we ban the hot dog? I don't have an easy answer to this question. I naturally prefer a low government solution to almost anything. Whenever possible. But, that's good to point out for people's health. I enjoy a good hot dog like anyone else. I don't know if I would make them a regular part of my diet. And I was just now thinking of Babe Ruth, who he died of cancer, didn't he? And he ate hot dogs every day. So
absolutely. Well, there you go.
What does. Right. So what's our headline? Is our headline "Hot Dogs Cause Cancer"? John, is that what you're trying to get the scare headline? Is that
That's the scare headline. Hot dogs cause cancer. Meanwhile, I have a few hot dogs in the fridge. But in my defense, the hot dogs in my fridge I got from Trader Joe, and they're free of hormones and nitrite and all that stuff. They're just meat in a convenient form. So to me, it's actually about labeling and education, Jim. It's not about government tyranny. Right? We should have a right to know what's in it, and other than that, I'm pretty okay making adult decisions as a grown-up, right? That's part of our benefit of being over 18.
Oh, sure. If you know the risks, then you can take the risks. We can't live in a risk-free society, and we certainly can't rely on the state to create such a society for us because, number one, it can't do it, and number two, in pursuit of that, it will trample on a lot of things that we would rather not have trampled.
So, Jim, if I may, I'm going to turn you back to Rare. There was another interesting subject matter that you guys covered today, which was the fact that you have unions who had been supporting the president who seem to be turning around and going in the other direction regarding Obamacare. What's the inside story there?
Well, it's like anything else, This was the legislation that it passed it to know what was in it. And now that it's being implemented, a lot of people are finding out that it's no good. It was supposed to lower costs, it's going to raise costs. Lower deductible, it's going to raise deductible. It's supposed to make care more available, it's going to make it less available. I mean, everything that was supposed to be good about Obamacare is turning out to be bad. And unions in particular are finding out that it's going to have really bad effects on their existing contracts for health care, on future negotiations for health care. By raising costs, it's going to raise compensation packages in a way that will not make them able to get the same kind of agreements that they wanted. And so suddenly, whereas they had been supporting it, I guess kind of A, out of loyalty to their guy, that they helped get in the White House, B, thinking would somehow benefit them, they're finding out that it will not benefit them, it will hurt them, and so they're starting to behave like any rational group would. They're turning against it.
Well, when it comes, at the end of the day, people have a tendency to vote for their self-interest, right? They may not be smart right away, but when you start feeling the pain, I mean, that's part of learning as an animal, right? You go, I saw he ate those purple berries, and he's now laying on the floor foaming at the mouth. I think I'll not eat the purple berries, right? So,
right, or the hot dog. But the thing is, the unions have an out, though, because the White House has been handing out waivers to favored groups right and left. There is a provision under the law where the executive branch can hand out waivers to people to get them out from under some of the strictures of Obamacare based on what criteria, who knows. I think the criteria are if you have a buddy in the White House, or you're connected or something, which is another reason why you don't want the government making too many decisions, because then the government tends to decide in the interests of those who are connected as opposed to the best interests of all. So whereas unions are finding out Obamacare is really bad for them, their little escape valve is, well, we'll just cut another deal with the White House and then it won't be bad for us. That just makes it all the more worse for everybody else who still has to put up with it.
Absolutely. And you wonder sometimes if some of these folks are, quote-unquote, backing away from Obamacare. Are they really backing away from Obamacare, or are they putting the screws to Obama to serve notice that we need more, right? It could be a simple negotiating tactic if you want you're going to have another hotly contested election because you're going to be trying to gain seats in the House. And as of recently, it looks like the Republicans might actually gain a lot of seats, but there's still plenty of time, so we'll hold off on that. So it could just be a negotiating tactic.
Oh, sure. You never know. I mean, they have to look to the future anyway. Obama is going to be gone after a while. He doesn't have any more elections that he personally stands for, so, we'll have to wait and see. But I think the basic interest of unions is finding out that since Obamacare is going to be much worse than even what some of us who were raising cautions about it predicted, that it's going to hurt them. And so they're just looking to their own interest in the immediate term right now and trying to get out from under it. I think the end game for the unions is a set of these waivers so they don't even have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Jim, I think we have time for one more headline, if we will. Anything else in particular that you wanted to cover?
Oh, well, there's just so much these days. The evolving scandals, the IRS scandal, Department of Justice, the Benghazi scandal. There's so much coming out every day. It's just hard to keep track of all of it. Joseph Curl, the Washington Times, and the Drudge Report says that, according to his sources, the White House is sitting on something that has senior aides frightened, and I can't wait to find out what that's going to be. We've heard other people on the Hill saying there's more to come, and when congressmen say that, they never say that unless they know for sure. The 100 emails that the White House released on Benghazi, this big document dump that was supposed to solve all the questions or answer all the questions, well, there's a 67-hour gap between the crisis and the first email, and then one member of Congress, I forget who, said there are 25,000 emails. The White House just picked the 100 best ones. So where are the other 24,900 emails? Can you wait for that? Oh, there's plenty more to go.
There's so much that's hidden here, and the funny thing is who do you not trust, right? I mean, just think common sense. You're looking at anybody in a crowd. The guy who stands out it's like the guy in the trench coat in the middle of the summer, right? That's the guy you really want to keep your eye on. Something's not quite right with that guy. And isn't he like the entire Obama administration and all his crony minions are all like the guy in the black trench coat walking up the beach, right? They just scream of "Don't trust me."
Right. Oh, yeah, well, no matter what they say, no matter what, Jay Carney says or press releases or the, so-called evidence or whatever they release, don't worry, just trust your common sense. There's obviously something much worse here than they have let on. Every time something new happens, their story changes. We're nowhere near the truth yet, so just trust your common sense, let that be your guide, and then see where it goes.
Well, I'm gonna look at this on the bright side for you, my friend. So about 6-8 weeks ago, less than 8 weeks since when did Rare tax day, right? The 15th?
Oh, it's April 15th. We started on tax day.
Okay, so here you are, 5 weeks since we went to your grand opening event, and I want to say that you guys in the back room, you might actually want to smile on Obama, because while he is destroying the country piece by piece, but eventually we'll take it back. He's been a good fan of Rare. I mean, look at every single day he's giving you an incredible amount of information and great content to draw people to Rare. So.
Oh, yeah, well, we thank him for that. In fact, I've been thanking that guy for years, because whenever I get stuck for a topic, all I have to do is wait a little bit, and then they're going to give us a new outrage. So there's always something to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, Jim, always a pleasure having you on the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can find Jim Robbins on the Conservative Connection, which is tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And as we tell you every week, remember, Beatrice also produces that show via All Fired Up Media, so please do listen to Jim every Wednesday morning. And that's Eastern Standard Time, if I didn't say that. And, of course, Jim's the deputy editor at rare.us, www.rare.us. Great news content and great commentary and activity around that content, so please do visit often. Jim, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to catching up with you same time next week.
Okay, John. See you then.
All right, be well.
Bye.